Alright, now in this lecture we are going to talk about randomization in Python because it's really important when we create computer programs that have a degree of unpredictability. Now the biggest category of these is games. So can you imagine if you had to play Tetris and every single time the block that fell down was predictable? So you always knew that it's going to be a T and it's going to be an L. So it's obvious that there will not be no fun in that game. So the games like Tetris use randomness to select falling down objects. Now in nature, in our daily lives, it's really easy to create randomness. If you splash some points on canvas, that's going to be pretty random. Now we are talking about computers and these machines are what we call them deterministic. They will perform repeatable actions in a fully predictable way. So how can we make these machines that operate basically based on ones and zeros to get them to create some random numbers? Well, to get a random number in computer, we need to implement a whole bunch of math to create what is called pseudo-random number generators. And the one that Python uses is called Mersenne Twister. Now, if you really want to read about it, you can have a look on Wikipedia and look at under algorithmic detail section. But to be honest, it's a little bit too much information for anyone, unless you are really interested in these types of number generators. Now we have talked about a lot about randomness. Now let's see it in action. So let's see how can we generate random numbers in Python. Now it's obvious that we are not going to implement the Mersenne Twister by ourselves because it is horrendously complicated using lots and lots of math, and probably it will take us months to write the code that is mentioned in this documentation over here. Now the question is, how can we get random numbers? Now as we discussed in our previous lecture, when we were talking about mathematical operations, we mentioned that to use complicated mathematical operations, we import math model and use equation from this math model. Now here to generate random numbers, the Python team have already created a model which is called random. Now I highly recommend to read the documentation of any given model before using it because you can find more useful information in the model documentation. Now if you search on Google for Python random model, the first documentation that comes from Python documentation. Now if I click on this, you will see that it says that this model implements pseudo-random number generators for various distributions. So if I go a little bit down, you will see bookkeeping functions, functions for bytes, function for integers, and even if you go down, you will see some examples that is used over here using random model. So from this documentation, you can see that it contains a whole bunch of functions that you can use for generating integers or random float. So let's see how can we tap into this model. Now, as we mentioned before, to be able to use any model in our program, we have to import it. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to import random model. Then we will able to use this random model in our main py file. So according to documentation, for example, if you want to generate random integer number, we have to use random models randint function. So it says that in documentation that it returns a random integer n such that it is located in this range that we provided over here. So in practice, if I write something like this, for example, random integer is equal to, I'm going to use the randint function. So I'm just going to put model name, then randint. So as you can see, we need to provide two parameters over here. So for example, let's say I want to generate random number between 10 and 20. So in this case, when you are using randint function, it includes 10 and 20 as well. Now, then after getting this value, I've assigned this return from randint function to random integer. I'm just going to print out this one to the console. So if I just do it like this and run our code, you will see that in this case, our random number is 18. Now, if I run it one more time, this time the random number will change to 19. So if I run it one more time, it might be the same number or it will change and bring out the number which is between 10 and 20. Now here we have seen how we create random whole numbers. But what if we want to create a random floating number? Now here, as I mentioned before, if I put after model name dot, it's going to bring all functions that I have inside this model over here. For example, in this case, if I select random and come on it, you will see that it says that this is generating the numbers between 0 and 1 and the return value is float. So in this case, if I run it like this, and I'm just going to create result variable over here, so I'm just going to delete the integer. So in this case, I'm just going to print out result and run our code. You'll see that in this case, it's generating a number which is located between 0 and 1. So here, take into account that 1 is not included. 0 is included, but 1 is not included. So if I run it one more time, it's generating another number. If I run it one more time, it's generating another number over here. So if you want to generate a number between 0 and 1, in which 1 is not included, then we can use random function over here. Basically, this function is the most used function in randomness, because by using this function, you can generate numbers between 0 and 1, or 0 and 5, or 0 and 10 over here. Now, the question is, in the definition of this function, it says that it's generating a number between 0 and 5. Now, what if I want to generate a floating number between 0 and 5? Now, how might we do that? Now, it's not complicated as you think it is. You'll be able to do it just looking at this code over here. So have a think about it and see if you can come up with your own answer. Then I will go through it with you afterwards. So pause the video and think, how can we use this function to generate a random number between 0 and 5? So hopefully you have done it by yourself. Now let's do it together. Now we know that this random function generates number between 0.00 and 0.999999. So how can we make these numbers to be between 0 and 5? Now if we multiply this random number by a number, let's say we are multiplying it by 5, in this case it's going to generate between 0.00 and if I multiply 9 with 5, it's going to be 0.45 and something like this. So in this case, it's never reached 5, but the largest number over here will be 4.99999, something like this. So let's do it in practice. So what I'm going to do, so I'm just going to take this result equal to result multiply by 5. Now if I run our code, you will see that in this case, it's returning 0.11101. And if I run it one more time, for example, in this case, it's printing out 4.7, and it continues like this. So as every time you see that it's generating a floating number between 0 and 5. In this case, you need to take into account that we are generating floating number. So we are looking for generation of floating number. As I explained before, if we want to generate integer number, in this case, we are going to use randit function. Now the question is, what can we do with these random numbers? And why do we need these random numbers over here? Now, if I just copy and paste the code of the love calculator that we created before, we can see that it's a kind of based on pseudoscience. Now, like in random numbers, we have a certain number of letters that exist in true and love keyword. And based on your names, we are finding the letters over here and saying that if you are compatible or not. So we can easily see that this is a random because we cannot predict the compatibility of two persons based on the letters in their names. So here also randomness plays a role. So if it is random anyways, so why don't we use a random number generator, saving our lives all of the trouble that we are counting T's, O's, and E's over here. We can just simply use random model over here and generate a number between 1 and 100, and based on this number we can interpret the score over here. So what I'm going to do in this case, I'm just going to delete this part in which we are counting the letters. Then initially I'm going to import random model. Then over here we are going to calculate the love score that we created over here. This is the variable based on randint function. So it's going to be like this: love score is equal to random dot randint. So it's going to generate between 1 and 100. So based on this love, we are going to print out the message over here like this. Now here you can see that we have saved a lot of time by using random model. Anyway, counting the letters in love and true keywords is also kind of random. So that's why instead of counting them, we can use just this random function over here. Now if I run our code one more time, you will see that first is ask our name. So if I put Jack over here, so for the second name, if I put Jenny, and hit enter, you will see that it says that your score is 19. So it's generated the score based on this randit function over here. Now if I run it one more time and put same names, you will see that in this case we have different results, because here we are using random function over here. So most of programs that is based on randomness use random model to generate the score or to generate the objects in the games. So after completing the rough calculate like this, who can tell us that there is a difference between the previous methods? So actual users do not see these codes, you putting their names and generating the message over here. So no one can identify that if it is based on the true and love keyword or it's based on random model. So with this example, you can see how can we use random model in our programs over here. So as I mentioned before, random model is especially used in case of games. So by generating random numbers, the games are unpredictable. Now with this, we have come to the end of this lecture. So in this lecture, we have discussed random model and we have implemented it in practice over here. So hopefully everything is clear about random model. So see you in the next lecture.